Bom dia a todos os presentes. É uma satisfação muito grande compor uma mesa que inesperadamente se formou com a maior qualificação que nós poderíamos prever para hoje. Aqui na companhia do meu amigo Marco Antônio, companheiro de longa jornada de graduação e de Procuradoria de Estado, desembargador César Cury, nosso presidente do Fórum da Escola da Magistratura relacionado à mediação, desembargador Alexandre Câmara, também dispensa maiores apresentações, tive a oportunidade de ser seu aluno na Escola da Magistratura, ainda na árdua caminhada da Procuradoria, e, evidentemente, a presença do nosso conferencista, o professor Remco Rhee, que também é uma figura internacionalmente conhecida, principalmente na comunidade europeia, pelos seus estudos de direito processual civil comparado, também uma vasta experiência na área da história do direito. Queria saudar todos os presentes também na pessoa do nosso Procurador-Geral, Dr. Fernando Barbalho, e do nosso professor Guilherme Socal, também colega e parceiro desses estudos de direito processual que temos tido nos últimos anos. Eu queria saudar o professor Remco e aproveitar e pedir escusas ao pessoal para fazer a sua introdução em inglês, até para colocá-lo mais à vontade aqui na nossa casa. So, introducing Professor Remco Rhee, he is the actual chair of European Legal History and Comparative Civil Procedure at the University of Maastricht. He has a doctorate grade in the Leiden University. He is a real expert in comparative law, comparative civil procedure, court organization, Roman law, European legal history, history of courts and adjudication. He is the director of the program Foundations and Principles of Civil Procedure in Europe of the Youth Community Research School, and he is a coordinator of many other research programs. He is a member of editorial boards of the Dutch Fleming Legal History Journal, the Dutch Law Journal on Civil Justice Administration, and other journals of the European Community. He's as an elected grade, he's the fellow of the Maastricht European Private Law Institute, founding board member of the European Society of Comparative Legal History, and council member of International Association of Procedural Law. And he has many recent publications, and it's a real honor having you today here in our institution, Professor, especially because the last 3 years we have been discussing in this auditorium the civil procedure, because we have a new code of civil procedure, and half of this time, 1 year and a half, we have the code being applied in our community, but we also need some light and some reflections, especially dealing with the duties and obligations of parties, of lawyers, and of judges. And so I'm sure that you will bring us international experience and comparative experience that for sure will illuminate our ways. And so with the highest expectation, and no more comments, the floor is yours, Professor.
Thank you very much for this nice introduction. Mr. Procurator General, ladies and gentlemen, I'm very honored to be here. I'm very pleased also with the kind invitation I got. I was telling to my friends here that this also feels like a little holiday. It's wonderful to be in Rio and to see all the sights. But obviously today I'm not here for a holiday, I'm here for presenting a paper on judicial case management. Or actually the paper is on the decline of adversarialism and the growth of cooperation in civil litigation. Well, if you talk about this topic, the terminology judicial case management is very often used, at least in Europe. and especially in comparative legal works. And the terminology judicial case management, sometimes only case management, became very popular in Europe as a result of the Wolf reform in England and Wales in 1998. England and Wales reformed its procedural rules at that time, and the key word of Lord Wolf, who was responsible for the new rules, is judicial case management. And the reforms in England and Wales were very important, at least from a European perspective, because England followed suit. Now the most important common law jurisdiction in Europe was also moving away from an idea that had dominated civil procedure for at least 2 centuries in Europe. And that idea was that since civil litigation is about the private rights and duties of the parties, since that is the topic, the subject matter, the parties should also be allowed to steer their civil process in the way they like, to actually litigate the way they think is advisable. That idea that was now actually losing ground in Europe. England and Wales was the last jurisdiction, I would say, that I was also moving away from that idea. I would be very interested in hearing something about Brazil. I know you have a new civil procedural code, and I would be very interested maybe during the discussion to see what has happened in this country as regards judicial case management. But let us first go back into history, because the idea that the parties should be in control, and this old idea that has been discarded, had a long history in Europe. It originates with a German lawyer, a German law professor, and his name was Karl Grollmann. You find his name mentioned on the slide. And my slides mention some names and some terminology. Karl Grollmann. Karl Grollmann, at the end of the 18th century, first stated very clearly it is the parties who should be in control, because it's private, civil litigation is about private rights and duties. And that idea was very quickly embraced by another scholar who is central in my presentation today, and that is Nicolaus Thaddeus Gunner. Later he was knighted, and then he became von Gunner, but he started his career as Gunner. Gunner formulated 2 contradictory fundamental principles of civil procedure, or as the Germans call them, Maximen. These are fundamental principles of civil procedure. A few years after Grollmann had announced his ideas. And one of these principles is the Verhandlungsmaxime. You also find it on the slide, which can be translated maybe as the adversarial principle. And that principle, in his view, dominated the procedure of most German states at the time. And you probably know that at the time every German state had its own procedural law. These states were relatively independent. The Gemeindeprozess, the common procedure of these states, was, according to Gunner, dominated by this Verhandlungsmaxime, an adversarial principle. And the other principle he distinguished is the Untersuchungsmaxime, which is actually the opposite of the Verhandlungsmaxime. And I think we can translate Untersuchungsmaxime by inquisitorial principle. And Gunner said, well, that principle dominates procedure in Prussia. So we have the common procedure of many German states dominated by the Verhandlungsmaxime, the adversarial principle. But there are some states in the German territory that are dominated by another principle, the opposite principle, which is the inquisitorial principle, the Untersuchungsmaxime. Now, in my paper, I will first discuss the ideas of Gunner. And I will very briefly look at a procedural treatise, a book that originated in the Low Countries, in the present day Netherlands and Belgium, because it gives you a good idea of the approach to the role of the parties and the judge in civil litigation in a system that was based on the Romano-canonical model. And as you may know, all our systems of procedure on the European continent and also in Brazil, I think, to a large extent, are based on this medieval procedure. It's nice to see what the position of the judge and the parties was in that procedure, because it's the ancestor of our modern procedural model. And then I will briefly look at developments in the 19th up to the 21st century. And my the last part of my talk is devoted to a project of the European Law Institute, at Rhee, and that project aims at developing rules of civil procedure for the European Union, because it is believed that the European Union needs harmonized rules, and I'm involved in that project. I'm responsible for rules of position of judges and parties in the civil lawsuit, so it might be of interest for you, I hope, to know something more about that project. And the European Law Institute is very new. It was founded 10 years ago. It's a little bit modeled according to the American Law Institute, and well, they are busy with developing various rules. It's mainly soft law, so there are proposals how Europe might, how the feature as regards legislation in Europe may look like. But first we should have a look at our friend Nicola from Gunnar. There he is. His picture, and actually, according to his contemporaries, he was not a very pleasant person. And when I describe him in the words of his contemporaries, you may be able to recognize a colleague. I had that experience myself when I read this. And they thought about him as follows. And the colleagues at the time, at the beginning of the 19th century, they said they agreed as regards the characterization of Gunnar as a gifted man, but a man who also destroys the fruits of his own talent due to envy, vanity, unlimited ambition, and an unrestricted appetite for power. So I guess you recognize a colleague. I did. Now, he was appointed a law professor at Bamberg in 1789, then he moved to Ingolstadt, and there he met Savigny, because the University of Ingolstadt later moved to Landshut, and that was where Savigny, the famous German law professor, also used to teach. Savigny was a little bit more mild in his views on Gunnar. Now, he was a late natural law lawyer, a representative of the Vernunftrecht. These were lawyers that tried to find principles that dominated the law. Gunnar looked at trying to find principles that governed the civil process. Now, his method was not very sophisticated. He would take some systems, Prussia in his case, and some other German states as a starting point, and then he would try to define how, for example, the role of the parties and the judge in the civil lawsuit was. And he came up with his Verhandlungsmaxime, adversarial principle, and his Untersuchungsmaxime. Well, he published a book about this at the start of the 19th century, and in his book he summarized the Verhandlungsmaxime as follows. He said, well, it is nichts von Amts wegen, nothing ex officio. And he referred in this way to a procedure that was really indeed purely adversarial. And it meant that in a civil lawsuit, in his view at least, the judge could only act at the request of the parties, and the judge did not have any ex officio powers. And in his view, the Dispositionsmaxime, which is another German principle, maybe that can be described as party control, that concerns the bringing of an action in court, the continuation of the action, and early termination, and that is the Dispositionsmaxime. You also find it on the slide. He didn't distinguish that one. He thought that that was incorporated by the Verhandlungsmaxime. So the parties are central in his view. And the inquisitorial principle, which he also distinguished, was present in only one jurisdiction at a time, and that was Prussia. And it meant, according to Gunnar, that the judge should always act ex officio. He should always act ex officio in a civil lawsuit. And in his view, the principle gave rise to an inquisitorial procedure in that the determination and investigation of the factual basis of the lawsuit was ultimately the task of the judge. So the judge had to research the factual basis of the lawsuit as well. Not only the law, the judge was not only in control of the law, but also in control of facts and evidence. Bonsdorff, who wrote a book on Gunnar, has demonstrated that the conclusions of Gunnar were not based on solid scholarly investigation. Even though the idea that the adversarial principle should be leading in civil litigation was very prominent throughout the 19th century. And this were Handboeksmaximen. When I was a student at law school in Leiden at the time, which is now, it's a long time ago, 30 years ago. But at that time they also taught me this principle. They said, well, our procedural models in Europe are dominated by the Handboeksmaximen. But actually when you look at it in detail, that was really not true. Bonsdorff states, and I agree with him, that the exceptions to the principle, both the common procedure and in Prussia, were so manifold that we can hardly speak about the fact that these procedures were dominated by any of the two principles. And the only thing that you can conclude is that a judge in Prussia had other and sometimes more extended powers as regards the investigation of the case than in the model of the Gemeindesrecht. And so you could say, well, it's a matter of degree. The purely inquisitorial model doesn't exist, and the purely adversarial principle was not observed anywhere. Both the judge and the parties, in actual fact, contribute to the development of the lawsuit. And this is also true for all historical and current models of civil procedure in Europe. It's wrong to talk in terms of these principles developed by Gunnar, even though we've done that a long time. And people still do it. And when you read American textbooks on comparative law, these American law professors still refer to continental civil procedure as inquisitorial. And I think that is very wrong. Because you have to distinguish and you have to look at to what degree can the judge be active, to what extent does he share his powers or her powers with the parties. So, de lege ferenda, when we are now making these rules in European law institutes, we should not look at these theoretical models developed by Bonsdorff, by Gunnar. We should not discuss the rules in light of the Handboeksmaximen or the Untersuchungsmaximen. A modern approach to civil procedure, in my opinion, requires that one considers it from a more or less practical perspective. You have to look at fairness, efficiency, speed, and low costs, in combination with the functions that the civil lawsuit should fulfill in our modern age. And these functions are, in my opinion, not limited. They are not limited to the protection of freely disposable private rights and obligations of individual parties, but I think there are other aims that the civil process should serve, and I will discuss these aims later on. But let's first have a look at some history. We're going back even further in history than with Gunnar. And here you see a gentleman who has been very instrumental in developing civil procedural law in the Low Countries, roughly the present-day territory of the Netherlands, Belgium, and Luxembourg. And these were countries, these were territories in Europe that were united at the time under the Dukes of Burgundy and later the Habsburg rulers. His name is Philip Wieland, and he wrote a handbook on civil procedure. Most likely a handbook that was aimed at training young lawyers to practice law at the Council of Flanders, which was the highest court in Flanders at the time. He wrote this book. It's called Praktijken Civiele, and that translates as civil practice. He finalized his manuscript in 1519, this treatise would be very influential in my part of the world. It would be influential because of the language. Our modern Dutch procedural terminology is mainly based on Wieland. But the book would also be very influential in Europe at large, because there was another gentleman, you find his name also mentioned there, Joost de Damhouder, who actually translated Wieland into Latin. He wrote a book on which he put his own name, Praxis Rerum Civilia, and there he basically translated Wieland, and that book, the result of plagiarism, became very leading in Europe of the 16th century. Now, I'm going to have a quick look at how the role of the parties and the judge looked in his handbook. Because it's important, I think, because what he discusses, what Wieland discusses, is basically the Romano-canonical model, which is the foundation of our modern systems of procedural law in the civil law countries. Of course, not in the common law, but in the civil law countries. Now, the first thing you should realize is that Gunnar had not been born at the time, so you don't find a general part in this handbook discussing principles of civil procedure. And you don't find the adversarial principle being discussed by Wieland. And so you have got to go through the whole handbook to find out what really is the position of the judge and the parties in the model he describes. Well, very modern, I would say. First of all, he states something that we all know nowadays as well, that a lawsuit cannot be started without the wish of the claimant. The claimant has to act. There is no authority, no state authority that will bring a lawsuit in the interest of the private litigant. This is what we now call the dispositionsmaxime at work. So the party has to take action in order to bring litigation. Of course, this was different in the former communist countries of Europe, but in the liberal world, obviously the party starts the lawsuit. The statement of claim, he says, actually determines the subject matter of the lawsuit. And the judge cannot go beyond the statement of claim. The parties, they are in control of the subject matter. The judge cannot make a lawsuit of himself. As regards postponements, the judge has also got a role to play. The judge should make sure that the litigation, the lawsuit, does not become too extended. The judge makes sure, as much as possible, that litigation is abbreviated, that postponements are only granted if this is justified. The parties are not in control. But the judge is exercising more powers. Also, as regards witnesses, the judge is rather prominent. The judge questions the witnesses. It's actually not completely like it seems. I've done some research in an old court in the Netherlands. Here you find documents which are handed over by the parties to the judge, which contain questions for witnesses. So actually, the situation was that the judge questions the witnesses, but that the parties have some input. They may actually give these documents to the judge, asking the judge, please ask this question. But in the end, the judge is presiding. The judge is in control. The judge may also decide not to ask a certain question. So again, the judge is rather prominent in the civil lawsuit already in the 16th century. This is a long time ago. Witnesses. The judge also decides about when the case is ready for judgment. Although, in actual fact, maybe the parties played a role because I've also found these documents in my old court, which is the Grand Conseil de Malice, the Great Council of Mechelen, the highest court in the local present time. And these documents were submitted to the court by professional petitioners hired by the parties, and they asked, please judge, give a judgment in the case. I find a legion of these documents in the case file, so most likely judges were not too keen on passing judgments. They had to be asked many times. But again, it shows in a way that the judge is in control. Well, I can tell you much more, but I think the important thing to note here is that this model was leading in the 19th century. This model was very prominent in most European countries, and it became leading also at the time of the codification of the laws in Europe, to start with France and with the Code de Procédure Civile. Another picture, and then I stop showing you old pictures. This is an important picture. This shows you the private bailiff in action in the 16th century. It's interesting to see that in the Low Countries you have a very effective system of enforcement. The number of judgments that were enforced already in the 16th century was higher than 60%. Successful enforcement was very visible, also in my court. And this gentleman is a private official who was trusted the task to enforce the judgments of the Great Council. And he was very effective because he had a private interest in enforcing as many cases as possible, because he would earn his salary by enforcing cases. But that's just something, a side remark. The guy is called the Huissier de Justice in French, the court bailiff. Okay, we'll move on to the codification period. I've demonstrated elsewhere, I think, that the French 1806 Code de Procédure Civile dominated procedural thinking for most of the 19th century in Europe. The code was not very innovative, because it was mainly based on a 1664 ordinance that was passed by Louis XIV, the French king. But it is important because for the first time now France got a unified procedural model. It differs from the 17th century ordinance, this 1806 code, because it made the position of the parties even more prominent than before. And this French code put an emphasis on the role of the parties in litigation, and that suited the liberal ideas of the 19th century very well. They talked about ownership of the procedure at the time, meaning that obviously we are the master of our own private rights and duties, and when you take your case to the court, you should also decide, and I mentioned this before, how you litigate. And that was pushed to the extreme in the 19th century French Code of Civil Procedure. It suits a liberal state in which the state itself has a rather limited role to play in public life very well. You give all the powers to the parties. The French 1806 Code talks all the time about la partie la plus diligente, the most diligent party. That party had to move the lawsuit forward. The judge would not interfere very much. The role of the judge was mainly to make sure that the rules were observed. But the parties were in control. At the time of Villon, in the 16th century, you've seen that the judge had a more prominent position. And now in the 19th century, it is model, this French model, that would really dominate civil procedural thinking in Europe. For a long time, we see that the judge is losing control, so to say. And basically, this lasted the whole 19th century. It was only at the end of the 19th century that things started to change. And that is not a surprise either, because at the end of the 19th century, the role of the state was changing. Governments in Europe were becoming concerned about socialist revolutions, about the workers becoming more powerful. And that meant that they would also be more involved in protecting the rights of the underprivileged. And in this French model, basically a party who could not hire a good lawyer would lose his or her case. You had to move the case forward yourself, you yourself were in control, and if you could afford a good lawyer, you would most likely win. Some people say, well, that this is still the American model to a large extent. I'm a bit hesitant to say this here because there may be Americans in the room, and I'm not sure whether this is really true, but some people say, well, this is still the American model. If you're a good lawyer in America, you win. Judge is very passive, and if you can't afford a proper lawyer, you are not in a very good position. Well, this problem was addressed, and I'm skipping some of the text on my slide because I think that I don't have time to explain everything. This problem was addressed by the gentleman on the slide. His name is Frans Klein, and he later became Minister of Justice of Austria, of the Austrian-Hungarian Empire, a big country at the time in Europe, not present-day Austria, of course, which is a tiny country. He wrote a series of articles which were published in the Juristische Blätter in 1819. It was later published as a book under the title Pro Futuro, and in that book he called for civil procedure reform. And he was so successful with his book that later he was appointed a lawmaking official in the Ministry of Justice. Again, later he will become the Minister of Justice of Austria. There are all kinds of things known about him. We have a fan club of Frans Klein in Europe because we like him very much, because he's the father of modern ideas in civil procedure. But we're also very much interested in his private life, which is quite special. He never married. He lived with his mother until his death, but, and that is important, and we're trying to find details about that, he had a relationship with the wife of his best friend, Friedlander, and we still don't know exactly what the relation was about, but it seems that Friedlander was interested in his wife, and that Klein filled the problem that came into being as a result of Friedlander moving away. But we don't know. Maybe a ménage à trois. All law professors in deal with civil procedure are interested in this, but we're not going to deal with that here. Now, Klein, he stated that a civil procedural code provides a number of rules and prescriptions which, taken alone and in relationship with each other, and judged from a purely scholarly perspective, he was a scholar, that code aims at providing the best possible procedural model available. However, whether this results, and this sounds interesting to us, whether this results in a good procedure in practice depends very much on those who apply the code. That is to say, the judges and the advocates. That's also something that was stated by Lord Woolf. Lord Woolf, when he reformed English civil procedure in the late 20th century, he said, well, basically what we're doing here is futile. Its attitude of especially judges doesn't change. We can make wonderful rules, but in practice, nothing will change if the judges are not trained, are not informed about the new ideas, and don't get incentives to actually apply the code in the right way. Procedural law is not so much about rules, it's about how these rules are applied in practice, and nothing will change if those involved don't change their attitude. Klein had more interesting things to say. He also disapproved of the Verhandlungsmaxime, the adversarial principle, as I've called it earlier on. He said the Verhandlungsmaxime, the adversarial principle, is very detrimental because it results in a situation where the parties have the power to make the judge decide the case based on the wrong facts, or at least based on half-truths, difficult to pronounce, or based on a factual substratum that is not fixed. It allows the parties, in his views, to dispose over state institutions, the court, as they deem fit, and it results, he says, in a war without a Red Cross. He said, actually, what you get here is what Roscoe Pound, in the early 20th century, called the sporting theory of justice. The parties are, like in sports, you're trying to win. Roscoe Pound had a nice view of sport, so he didn't see it as a bad thing. He said, well, you fight with each other, for example, a boxing game, and the one who is strongest wins. Klein says no, actually it's worse, it's a war without a red cross, because it means that all the verhandeling maxime allows all means for a party to win his or her case, and we don't want that. And he especially focused on the relationship between the judge and the parties, and also on the relationship between the parties themselves. He said that we have to move to a different procedural model. It's not about sporting, it's not about a war. Litigation should be about cooperation between the judge and the parties. And that means, according to Klein, that the judge should be involved in establishing the facts on which his decision should be grounded. It should not be left only to the parties. It means that he should question the parties whenever he or she was of the opinion that further information is needed to decide the case. The judge needs to be active. The judge is tasked to make sure that the facts of the case on which his decision or her decision will be based become clear. The judge, in Klein's view, may pose questions about facts, even if they're not directly relevant for the determination of the claims of the parties. That goes rather far. He may order a personal appearance of the parties in court, and may also take into consideration observation he has made ex officio in court, and so his own observations, without these observations being used by the parties, and he may also order himself an expert report. All evidence that is available in the case file, all evidence that is available, evidence also that is not being referred to by the parties, may be judged. He may order the hearing of witnesses, etc., etc. So a very strong judge. And he bases his approach on his socio-political viewpoints, and that these viewpoints become very clear when he quotes Rousseau. Rousseau says, "Les lois sont toujours utiles à ceux qui possèdent et nuisent à ceux qui n'ont rien." And the laws are always useful for those who own, and they are detrimental to those who have nothing. So his views are rather social democratic, I would say. He also based part of his views on socialist law professor Anton Menger. And then, again, and this is nothing new, because most likely we all agree on the fact that a procedural model in the end is based on political beliefs. The adversarial model is a liberal idea on civil procedure. The model propagated by Franz Klein is more, social democratic, maybe, or socialist. But that is not to say that it is a model that we find in the late communist states of Europe. Because Klein is very careful about defining the role of the judge. The judge is not omnipotent, but the judge has more powers than in the liberal model. He talks about Mitarbeiterschaft. That's a word I also like when he talks about the litigation. He says, actually the parties and the judge have a common goal, the decision of the case, and they should not use strategies to prevent the judge from coming to the right decision. I will skip the first quote because it's a bit long and it's complicated German. I will move on with later developments. And this Austrian model became leading in Europe. First, it was introduced in Germany. In the 1920s and 30s, the German adopted many of the approaches that were suggested by Franz Klein. Later, the French were influenced by this. There was a very famous French procedural lawyer, there were actually two, Albert Tichier and Henri Modulski. And they were very much influenced by the ideas of Franz Klein. And this model, of course, that also belongs a little bit to the developing welfare state in Europe. Maybe not in Germany in the 1920s and 30s, but when the French started to change their model, of course, these were the beginnings after the Second World War of the European democratic welfare state. And this model of Klein suited that welfare state well. So France was influenced. And you could even say, as we have seen in the beginning of my talk, that now also England and Wales are influenced by these ideas. When you look at the ideas of the drafter, Lord Rhee. Well, he doesn't mention Frans Klein. I think he didn't even know Frans Klein when he was drafting the rules. I talked with him, and now he knows, he told me about Klein. He wants to read about him, but in 1998 he didn't know about Klein. But what he did in England and Wales was, of course, in line with developments in continental Europe. Also because, of course, the costs of litigation in England and Wales were getting out of hand in the late 20th century. So the judge became more active. The difference between the common law and continental countries is that in the common law, the powers of the judge especially are more aimed at how you administer the case, so he takes the formal decisions about postponements, about whether or not a certain witness is allowed to appear in court, these matters. Whereas on the continent, case management goes much further, since the judge is also involved in establishing the facts of the case. Common lawyer will say, well, maybe this is going too far because the judge may be impartial if we take such an interest in the facts of the case. But nevertheless, England moved a little bit more to the European continent at the end of the 20th century. Now, the opposite is happening, of course, due to Brexit, but at the end of the 20th century, things were different. So now you have an idea of, well, in broad lines, I discuss this very quickly, about where we stand in Europe as regards civil procedure. And we come from a procedure which was actually rather liberal, as we, I shouldn't maybe use the word liberal, but rather lenient as regards the powers of the judge. We looked at Philips Wieland and his 16th century treatise, where he discusses the Romano-canonical model, and the judge has extended powers. And in the beginning of the 19th century, there is this reaction against that model, the French Code of Procedure Civile, in which the powers of the judge are reduced and the powers of the parties become larger. It's also the time that Gunnar formulates his adversarial principle, the Handlungsmaxime. Then we moved on to the end of the 19th century, where there is a reaction against that model again. Frans Klein, who says, oh no, litigation is about cooperation, Mitarbeiterschaft. And that model then spreads over Europe. And now we are at the start of the 21st century, and some lawyers, like I myself, have been asked to develop a procedural model that would suit the European Union at large. We are not lawmakers, we are only doing this in order to create soft law, an example of how procedural law may look in Europe, but I think it's nevertheless interesting. I hope so. I will tell something about it in the remainder of my talk. Now in Europe, a more active judge has, as we have seen, been advocated for quite some time. But new, I think, is that this activity is currently often framed within the wider context of the duty to cooperate, which is derived from Frans Klein. So it's not that new, actually. And it is within that context that currently we use the terminology judicial case management. That happens in France, where they talk about the Crescimento da Cooperação, Cooperationsmaxime in Germany now. In Austria, it's also called like this. So judicial case management is being discussed in the context of the judge and the parties being required to cooperate. So it's not only about the position of the judge, it's more. We have now reached a stage in Europe in which judicial case management in its modern sense is present in most European jurisdictions, although the intensity of the powers of the parties and the judge may vary throughout Europe. And that is not to say that the modern approach to civil litigation based on judicial case management and cooperation has been accepted everywhere, because there are some countries that still resist. I was in Ukraine recently, where they have a new code of civil procedure, and there they still very much believe in adversarialism. And that is probably due to the fact that the socialist judge abused his powers. As you probably know, the socialist judge tries to achieve certain political gain, not gains, political aims, I should say, through the civil process. And that's what they don't like. It's related to Russia, which they also don't like in Ukraine. And so they're still a bit hesitant, or a bit hesitant. They're very hostile, I should say, against this idea of cooperation and judicial case management. But I think Ukraine is the exception. Now, within this context, as I said, we are now drafting harmonized European rules, or at least an example of harmonized procedural rules for Europe. And the rules are explicitly made for the member states of the European Union, since it is felt that these rules will facilitate the application of substantive EU law and enhance the very prominent 4 freedoms within the European Union. And the 4 freedoms are about the free movement of persons, goods, services and capital throughout Europe. And I think these rules are very important because you should remember that most EU law has to be applied through the national courts of the member states, since the system of federal European courts does not exist in the European Union. And dependence on national courts also means dependence on a variety of national civil procedural models, and this situation seems to prevent the creation of a level playing field for the citizens and the businesses in the EU. And you can, there's an interesting example. Imagine harmonized EU law has to be litigated through a court in a member state. When you litigate your case through a court in Germany, even if you go up to the highest level, so 3 instances, it takes about 2 years, which is relatively short. So for a German citizen who invokes harmonized EU law, the situation is rather pleasant. But now think of a litigant in Italy. In Italy, it seems that the same 3 instances take about 12, 13 years, if at all. Enforcement in Italy is also very, very problematic. In Germany, it's not. So, even though we have harmonized EU law, we are dependent on the national courts, and that harmonized law means nothing, I would say, harmonized substantive law, if you go to a court of law, because your position is completely different in Italy when compared to Germany. And from that perspective, we are working on our rules. We are aware of the fact, of course, that the rules are not the only thing, but maybe developing some best practices, because that's what our rules are based on, is a good idea. Now, within the context of our project, various working groups are currently drafting rules on various procedural topics. And it's anticipated that in 2018, but I think it's more likely that it will be 2019, there will be a set of consolidated rules published. As I said before, I'm personally co-chairing a working group involved in the drafting of rules that concern the obligations of the judge and the parties in civil litigation, and I would like to say something more about the rules that we have drafted until now. The proposed rules are grouped under 5 headings. So our subgroup has drafted rules on the role of the judge and the parties, and those rules are grouped under 5 headings. The first part deals with the duty of loyal cooperation. That's the start of our rule, and that part serves as a kind of overriding objective. And you probably know that terminology from the English rules of procedure, an overriding objective. The idea is that all the rules that follow should be interpreted by the court from the perspective of loyal cooperation. And so you may not twist the rules to get something else than, this very important principle of loyal cooperation. We have formulated guiding principles for the parties, the lawyers and the courts separately, although obviously you may argue that especially lawyers and parties should be looked at as one entity. But we feel that for our purposes it's enough to group lawyers and the parties together. Now, that's part one of our rules. Loyal cooperation is followed by 4 specific parts which have a similar structure. Each part contains separate rules on the obligations of the court, the parties and the lawyers, as well as a section on sanctions for the breach of procedural obligations. And as a result, sanctions are mentioned in all parts of the rules. Sanctions can be either negative consequences as regards the manner in which the case is litigated, or they can be positive sanctions, such as fines. Part 2 deals with obligations in regard to management and planning of the proceedings. Management and planning. And we suggest that the judges, in implementing their judicial case management tasks, are monitored by the court. So the judges are monitored by the court in order to see whether indeed individual judges live up to what is ordained by the rules. If we feel that this does not touch upon the independence and impartiality of judges. And the court monitors its judges in order to see whether in an administrative way they deal with the case in the right manner. And that the court is not influencing the decision of the judge. That is independence and impartiality. No, the court structure only observes whether the judges apply the rules in the right manner. It is the court's duty to organize the proceedings in a way that guides all participants in the process to a result that is appropriate, fair, and just. Our rules lay down that the court has a responsibility for active and effective case management, but is always in cooperation with the parties. And the obligation of the court is discharged by various case management orders and activities, and by a continual monitoring of whether the obligations of the parties, the lawyers, and other participants in the proceedings are observed. Of course, continual monitoring does not imply that the court needs to check the process of individual cases on a daily basis, but it has to do so on a regular basis. Now, this is on management. And so you get a situation in which the court is responsible, the judges apply the rules, but always in consultation with the parties. The parties are asked for their opinion on decisions that the court may take. And the right place to do this is a so-called case management conference. Case management conference is something that was taken from the common law world. And the case management conference is central. It's there where the judge and the parties set the procedural calendar. And the aim is, which cannot be always attained, the aim is to make sure that judge and parties agree on the calendar that is set. Cooperation all the time. Now, that is part 2. So we have part 1, the overriding objective, loyal cooperation. Part 2 is on management, cooperation between different parties. Then there's a third part, which is devoted to the determination of the facts of the case. And our idea is that the parties should supply facts and evidence and assist in the proper determination of the facts. And the parties, and that's not very new of course, the parties need to provide a judge with information concerning the facts whenever this is deemed necessary. And we think that an oral hearing is the best moment to do this. So the oral hearing is, in our perspective, central. But apart from the parties, the court itself has certain powers as regards the facts of the case, and also as regards evidence. Insofar as necessary, the court has to discuss the factual aspects of the case with the parties, and also has to question the parties, to the effect that the parties explain all facts that are considered relevant for the case. So the traditional approach is, of course, that the facts are something that belong to the parties, but in our model, also the court becomes active in the sense that the court actively discusses the facts with the parties. And this is, of course, something that we have derived from the ideas of Franz Klein. It is the late 19th century idea of the position of the judge. Our judge, in our rules, is not the passive judge of the French Code of Procedure Civile anymore. There is a part 4 which deals with findings of law, and there we've also taken a different approach to matters. I guess that also in this country the Jura Novit Curia rule applies. But we now say, well, this is maybe not, it cannot serve as an excuse for the parties anymore not to provide the legal basis of their claims. The parties are, in our model, required to discuss together with the judge the possible legal basis of the claim. If they don't do so, the judge will not do this for them. In the end, the judge remains responsible for the correct legal basis, but that is not an excuse for the parties not to discuss the rules of law that, in their view, apply to their case. Again, this is, I think, a reflection of this idea of cooperation in civil litigation. And then there is a final part that deals with the duty of the court to promote consensual dispute resolution. It's also an old one. Wieland already says in the 16th century it's an ex officio task of the judge to see whether the case can be finalized in a consensual manner, whether a settlement is possible. Well, we also believe in this idea. So the judge should, throughout the procedure, see whether consensual dispute resolution is possible. So, model of procedure for the European Union based on, well, historical developments, based on best practices in Europe, and of course we hope that this model will be embraced. For example, that countries are reforming their procedural law, their procedural code. And we cannot force this on countries. We don't have any competences in this respect. And the European Law Institute is not a body that legislates for the European Union. But we hope that we can convince national legislatures to adopt some part, maybe all of our rules that they reform. Because of course, as you've seen also during the first meeting, in law reform, comparative law should always be very important. I was a bit surprised that in the first meeting this was presented as something new in my own country, but it is law reform. There's always comparative law involved. The departments in the Ministry of Justice dealing with law reform are informed by scholars about solutions that exist in other countries, especially the practical area of the civil procedure is of course very important. Now I come to a conclusion because it's nearly time. My conclusion is that I think that in my paper I've tried to link the historical development of civil procedural law in Europe with modern trends. I think that history is very important when you're discussing harmonization, especially procedural harmonization. And I've tried to explain that the ideas that have come to fruition in our times are not new. Most of them are actually not new, but that they find their origin in a shared European legal history. A European history actually which also influenced other parts of the world. When I look at my own country, when I look at the procedural model of present-day Indonesia, of course these parts of the world have a lot in common. I guess that maybe in this part of the world maybe you have been influenced by Portuguese ideas, but I'm not sure. That's something we should maybe discuss during the discussion. In my opinion, this realization, the fact that we realize that there is a shared legal past, a shared development also, they make proposals for an instrument of soft law for Europe, for the EU, more acceptable in the national jurisdictions of the European Union. Maybe not everywhere. Obviously, Ukraine is not part of the European Union, but there are difficulties in selling these ideas, so to say. People became very hostile. I discussed this particular topic. Oh, we don't want this. This is the socialist approach, and I tried to explain it's not. But people were so angry, I think, that they didn't think about it. But what they have now is actually, in my view, very old-fashioned. I think my presentation showed that many of the new ideas are not as new as they seem, but I think that many of these ideas find their origin in this Romano-canonical model that was later elaborated by various codifications in Europe of the 19th and 19th century. And obviously I hope very much that we will be successful in our endeavors, but that is of course not guaranteed. I hope that you're willing to consult the rules that will be published most likely early 2019 and give your opinion on that, because obviously they are aimed at the European Union, but they may be of interest to lawyers dealing with civil procedure in the world at large. Thank you very much for your attention.
Well, very thank you, Professor. This historical approach that you made, it's especially important because we always think that we are trying to bring something innovative or new to our models, but sometimes we are trying just to rebuild institutes that have been discussing for centuries. So this approach is very important for us. I will go to the opposite of the day before yesterday, when Professor Stark said that it's good to be a professor, that he doesn't have to think about solutions, but I will try to tease you with some reflections, especially because the second part of our event, Marco will try to introduce you some aspects of our civil procedure code, so we can try to think about some things that will be important in this line of cooperation. I mean, nowadays in developing countries we have some special challenges because we have a huge number of suits in courts. We have here 2 state courts members that can bring this experience, and nowadays we have a huge number of cases dealing with public policies, fundamental rights, and consumption and public services. So we have a kind of litigation that needs the equation that you said about efficiency, speed, and low cost. But on the other hand, the solution for a cooperative environment means an increase of hearings, an increase of conversation. And Professor Cesar Curi is the coordinator of a very important program with state courts, with all our country, discussing mediation and alternative solutions. But we need time, and we have too many suits in courts just to be finished, to start to go through this way. So we have a new legislation that prays for cooperation, good faith, loyalty, and every kind of institutes that pray for this conversation of parties, judges, and lawyers. But we don't have time. I mean, we have fundamental rights and economic crisis and many things where we don't have time to spend time discussing some aspects. And so we turn the private litigation, especially the most complex ones, to the arbitration. So I'm sure that the biggest enterprises are changing to arbitration because the time is very expensive for them. But we have to think about solutions, about how to increase cooperation, to bring the substantive right and the substantive truth to our procedure. That's what I would say to you. But now we turn to Marco Antonio. I'm proud to introduce Marco again because I was reading about his qualification, and it's special because as we are friends, you don't realize how much things we're doing through these years. And Marco now is a postdoctor and by the University of Coimbra, professor of our state university, and also member of the International Association of Procedure Law of the Instituto Ibero-Americano de Direito Processual, e também member of the Portuguese Institute of Civil Procedure. So, Marco, the floor is yours.
Boa tarde a todos. Gostaria, em primeiro lugar, de cumprimentar os membros da mesa, presidente da mesa, Nicola, amigo aí já de quase 20 anos. Uma alegria podermos estar juntos na mesa. Cumprimentar também professor Rhee. Remco, it's a pleasure to have you here. Thank you for your excellent speech. Thank you for your excellent speech. The historical background is very important to realize how much this influenced our civil procedure rules. Também cumprimento Alexandre, César, queridos amigos, processualistas e magistrados comprometidos. Agradeço imensamente o convite do Centro de Estudos e parabenizo na pessoa da doutora Nathalie o grande evento, não só esse, como todos os eventos que estão sendo feitos ao longo do ano. Realmente são primorosos e a organização da doutora Nathalie e do doutor Anderson, de todo o staff deles, realmente é muito diferenciado. Cumprimento todos os presentes. E dentro da exposição do professor Rhee, ele tratava do processo cooperativo e do case management, da flexibilização procedimental. E então eu parto daí para debater, no papel de debatedor, falar um pouco da flexibilização procedimental no âmbito do nosso processo civil, a partir do Código de Processo Civil de 2015. E logo de plano, quando nós pensamos em flexibilização procedimental, vem à tona uma preocupação, talvez um óbice, que, como vou mostrar para vocês, não é um óbice, ao contrário, é uma possibilidade que vamos ter, mas sempre vem à tona preocupação com o devido processo legal. Nosso modelo constitucional de processo traz uma garantia fundamental de devido processo legal. Até que ponto, pelo fato de a Constituição trazer um devido processo legal, isso faria com que o nosso processo se tornasse um processo muito estável, pouco flexível? E, na verdade, para que nós possamos responder isso, nós temos de pensar o que é o devido processo legal. Será que o devido processo legal deve ser visto sob um prisma meramente procedimental, de processo cujas normas estão definidas em lei? Me parece que não. Me parece que a Constituição da República e a própria concretização dos direitos fundamentais processuais no nosso Código de Processo Civil de 2015 nos trazem um devido processo legal como um direito fundamental ao processo adequado. O devido processo legal não é um direito a um processo invariável ou previamente estabelecido em lei. O devido processo legal é o direito ao processo adequado para o conflito de interesses. Tanto assim que o próprio Código de Processo estabelece uma série de tutelas diferenciadas. Nós temos uma série de procedimentos especiais que representam tutelas diferenciadas, tentando adequar o processo às necessidades concretas. Mas vejam que, ao lado de todas essas hipóteses que nós vamos encontrar de procedimentos especiais, existe sim uma margem de flexibilização procedimental que vai decorrer de uma conjunção de diversas garantias. Primeiro, do devido processo legal com um direito ao processo adequado. Mas não só ele, aqui temos de associar o devido processo legal ao direito fundamental de acesso à justiça. O direito fundamental de acesso à justiça é o direito de acesso à solução justa para o conflito de interesses. E o processo inflexível pode não ser capaz de trazer a solução justa para o conflito de interesses. Nós temos a cooperação de que tratava o professor Rhee, o processo cooperativo, a cooperação que está consagrada no artigo 6º do nosso Código de Processo como uma das normas fundamentais do processo civil brasileiro, traz a necessidade de um processo enquanto comunidade de trabalho. Um processo em que todos os sujeitos tenham um papel ativo para a construção da decisão final. Se todos terão um papel ativo para a construção da decisão final, partes e juiz em conjunto podem adaptar o processo às necessidades concretas. E não podemos esquecer da eficiência. A eficiência que está com uma norma fundamental do nosso Código, no artigo 8º, a eficiência, o professor Rhee pode até dizer isso melhor do que eu, mas a eficiência no âmbito da Europa vem sendo uma das grandes preocupações das reformas legislativas da própria Corte Europeia de Direitos Humanos, um processo que possa trazer os melhores resultados para o conflito de interesses. Então, se pensarmos em todas essas preocupações, seja do constituinte, seja do legislador, enquanto normas fundamentais do processo civil, permitem que cheguemos a um processo flexível. Isso é uma mudança de paradigma no nosso processo. Lembro-me das lições do professor Cândido Dinamarco, que traz em seu livro, classicamente, a ideia de que processo e norma procedimental é previsão de ordem pública e que não poderia ser alterada. Ora, aqui, diante da concepção de devido processo legal como direito a um processo adequado, diante da eficiência da cooperação, o processo não pode ter mais suas normas procedimentais tidas como normas de ordem pública, que não podem ser alteradas. Lembro-me, lá pelos idos de 2012 e 2013, alguns colegas aqui na Procuradoria tentavam fazer com que o magistrado dispensasse uma audiência de conciliação do rito sumário, porque naquele tempo nós ainda não tínhamos a cultura da consensualidade tão evidente no processo brasileiro, e eram hipóteses em que não havia a menor chance de o Estado conciliar, oferecer uma proposta enquanto réu. E alguns magistrados, diante de petições do Estado dizendo não há a menor chance de conciliarmos, alguns magistrados diziam não vou dispensar a audiência, o procedimento é matéria de ordem pública. E eu ficava me indagando, será que esse é o processo adequado, em que as partes terão de comparecer a uma audiência com uma finalidade que não vai ter qualquer efeito? Exatamente. César lembrava aqui do protocolo institucional que inclusive foi celebrado aqui pela Procuradoria do Estado e o Tribunal de Justiça, exatamente para recomendar que não tivéssemos audiências em casos em que não houvesse qualquer poder para que o advogado público pudesse tentar uma conciliação. E o Código de 2015 me parece que traz aqui vários instrumentos ligados à flexibilização procedimental. Primeiro deles aqui, nós temos de pensar da flexibilização por uma atuação direta das partes. Temos de lembrar dos negócios jurídicos processuais. O Código de 2015 traz como inspiração no Código francês os negócios jurídicos processuais com uma cláusula geral de negócio processual. O artigo 190 traz uma possibilidade do uso do autorregramento da vontade das partes. As partes podem, por meio dessa cláusula geral do artigo 190, fazer acordos procedimentais que deem ao processo a melhor performance possível. Então, por exemplo, nós poderíamos fazer um acordo procedimental relativamente a prazos aqui na Procuradoria, e ao lado da cláusula geral de negócio processual, nós vamos encontrar também regras específicas de negócios processuais típicos. Então, por exemplo, negócio processual para escolha de perito, artigo 471 do Código de Processo, seria um ótimo negócio processual que poderíamos ter aqui no âmbito do processo ligado ao Estado, por exemplo, em demandas de saúde, que a Procuradoria pudesse fazer um negócio processual com a Defensoria Pública, já estabelecendo um quadro de peritos estatais a quem a Defensoria recorrerá logo de plano, para que o eventual laudo que seja trazido com a petição inicial seja um laudo de alguma daquelas pessoas que o Estado já confia que podem trazer ali um parecer técnico sobre a saúde daquele administrado que vai ao judiciário pleitear uma medida de saúde. Ao lado dos negócios jurídicos processuais, nós também temos a flexibilização procedimental pelo juiz, que é algo semelhante ao que há no Código de Processo Civil português, em que o juiz tem um poder de gestão processual, mas que é um poder aberto, como que uma cláusula geral. E aí aqui, no Código Brasileiro, meus amigos, nós podemos encontrar vários instrumentos de flexibilização procedimental pelo juiz. Por exemplo, artigo 139, inciso 6º, o juiz pode dilatar prazos processuais. Então, a flexibilização procedimental quanto a prazos. Artigo 373, flexibilização procedimental quanto a ônus da prova. O artigo 373 permite a distribuição dinâmica do ônus da prova. Quanto o juiz, pela distribuição dinâmica, atribui o ônus da prova a cada sujeito a partir de suas melhores possibilidades probatórias, rompendo com aquele critério abstrato de que quem deve produzir a prova é quem alegou o fato, porque aí o juiz, à luz do caso concreto, avalia quem tem melhores condições de provar. Vejam que o magistrado está flexibilizando as regras sobre provas. Quando pensamos também no poder geral de efetivação de decisões pelo magistrado, quando o magistrado vai adotar a medida executiva mais adequada, conforme ele é autorizado pelo artigo 139, inciso 4º, isso é uma forma de flexibilização de medidas executivas, já que ele pode buscar uma medida executiva, inclusive não prevista em lei. Então, a flexibilização procedimental, ela está em diversos pontos do Código. E fico me questionando, e aí até para reflexão dos colegas, até que ponto, e inclusive aqui para o professor Rhee, deixo até para quem sabe se ele pudesse dar a opinião dele posteriormente para nós, até que ponto, por uma flexibilização procedimental, à luz do case management, poderíamos, inclusive, relativizar certas preclusões no processo. Há certas situações em que as preclusões podem não levar a uma solução mais justa. Vou dar um exemplo aqui para todos. Por exemplo, o Código delimita até que momento podemos ter uma alteração de causa de pedir e pedido. E o Código estabelece o momento do saneamento do processo como o último momento para tanto. Há uma preocupação de que depois tenhamos a instrução e a sentença. Mas até que ponto, meus amigos, se posteriormente a esse momento fica claro que o autor precisa de algo que é diferente daquilo, não seria melhor uma modificação da demanda, uma flexibilização dessa preclusão, para que nós tivéssemos a alteração do pedido ou da causa de pedir, o réu já pudesse se defender naquele momento e a sentença decidisse com base no que efetivamente as partes têm em conflito? Porque caso contrário, o que vai acabar acontecendo? Caso contrário, dias depois de aquele autor não ter a modificação da demanda permitida, ele vai propor uma nova demanda, com base numa nova causa de pedir e um novo pedido. Trata-se de mais uma demanda para a estatística do Poder Judiciário, e que vai levar a esforços tanto das partes como do Judiciário. Então, vejam que eu não estou aqui defendendo uma insegurança jurídica, mas que a flexibilização procedimental pode permitir que tenhamos, inclusive, a relativização de algumas preclusões, como uma forma de obtermos a solução justa para o conflito de interesses, que é garantia fundamental do artigo 5º da Constituição. No caso da Europa, está consagrada lá no artigo 6º da Convenção Europeia de Direitos Humanos, o direito a um processo justo e eco, da mesma forma. E, finalmente, deixando para reflexão de todos, a cooperação. O professor Rhee falava do advento da cooperação, declínio de uma postura de um magistrado que dê todas as regras do jogo, ou em contrapartida de um processo em que as partes têm uma liberdade muito ampla. A cooperação, me parece que ela é um ponto de equilíbrio entre um processo adversarial e um processo inquisitório. Será até que ponto não poderíamos pensar na flexibilização procedimental conjunta, já que a cooperação traz uma comunidade de trabalho que as partes e o juiz em conjunto possam, então, flexibilizar o procedimento, tal qual, por exemplo, o Código de Processo, no artigo 357, permite o saneamento compartilhado entre as partes e o juiz, numa audiência saneadora. Se as partes podem, junto com o juiz, sanear o processo, por que não nós termos aqui também flexibilizações procedimentais em conjunto? É claro que isso dependerá, e aí até eu e o César aqui conversávamos, trocávamos ideias há pouco, isso dependerá também de um juiz que adote a cooperação como um dever de engajamento na solução justa, para que ele, vendo que há situações em que é possível uma flexibilização conjunta, chame as partes para, em conjunto, tentarem adequar o processo para a melhor situação concreta. Então, a cooperação tem um papel muito importante também nessa flexibilização procedimental. Diante de processo inquisitório ou processo adversarial, acho que nosso modelo constitucional de processo traz um juiz que seja garantista, ao mesmo tempo que garanta os direitos fundamentais das partes, dentre eles a sua liberdade. A liberdade é um direito fundamental, não só na vida civil, mas dentro do processo. Mas que também seja um juiz que não deixe de lado a efetividade do processo. E aí, esse é um desafio que o nosso Poder Judiciário tem hoje com a cooperação, mas não só o Judiciário, também as partes, que têm um dever de buscarem também atuar de forma ativa na busca dessa solução justa. Até porque o Código não espera do magistrado uma postura messiânica, mas uma postura em que atue conjuntamente com todos os sujeitos do processo. Acho, portanto, que nosso processo civil, com a cooperação, a flexibilização procedimental, tem muitas possibilidades que podem ser exploradas. E é nosso papel, em conjunto com o Judiciário, explorarmos e melhorarmos a eficiência do processo brasileiro. Essas eram minhas considerações como debatedor. Muito obrigado a todos pela atenção.